Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Jasodhanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodhanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamanatira Vanachadi Jamanatira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Madhava Punjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Madhava Punjabi Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Yasodhanandana Brajajanaranjana Yasodhanandana Brajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachadi Yamunatira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Madhava Punjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Madhava Punjabi Hari Jayo Vishnupad Paramahansa Harivajagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavadinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaur Pimanandi. Is your air conditioning loud? Could you make it a little lower, a little colder? Pretty warm in here. At least that's what it feels like to me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. The Gopis sing to Kṛṣṇa as he wanders in the forest. Vipralamba bhav, but absorption in thought of Kṛṣṇa. So these are, we heard there's a collection of verses assembled by by Vyasadeva, or spoken by Shukadev Goswami, from different times of the day. It's not like one session, it's different periods of the day, as Krishna is wandering in the forest. And they're satisfying themselves by remembering Krishna in this way. And the pain of separation is diminished by remembrance of Krishna. So, chapter 35, this section that I'm reading from this morning. There's several, it's this long section actually. Starting with Priti Sandarbha, describing different symptoms of the love of the gopis. So here's text 14 from this chapter. O pious mother Yashoda, your son, who is expert in all the arts of herding cows, has invented many new styles of flute playing. When he takes his flute to his bimba red lips and sends forth the tones of the harmonic scale in variegated melodies, Brahma, Shiva, Indra, and other chief demigods become confused upon hearing the sound. Although they are most learned authorities, they cannot ascertain the essence of that music, and thus they bow down their heads and hearts. Jiva Goswami writes, the restlessness here is not like the restlessness felt by Kubja. In Srimad Bhagavatam is a passage where, in groups of double stanzas, the gopis describe the sweetness of Lord Krishna's flute. The gopis, however, do not become bewildered by the sound of Lord Krishna's flute as the demigods do. The gopis say in that passage, text 17 of this chapter, as Kṛṣṇa strolls through Vraja with his lotus petal-like feet, marking the ground with the distinctive emblems of flag, thunderbolt, lotus, and elephant goad, he relieves the distress of the ground, distress from the cow's hooves. As he plays his renowned flute, his body moves with the grace of an elephant. I don't normally think of an elephant being graceful, but that's the comparison here. We, gopis, who become agitated by Cupid when Krishna playfully glances at us, stand still as trees, unaware that our hair and garments are slackening. And going back to the beginning of this chapter 35, the gopis also say, quote, when Mukunda vibrates the flute he has placed to his lips, stopping its holes with his tender fingers, he rests his left cheek on his left arm and makes his eyebrows dance. At that time, the demigoddesses traveling in the sky with their husbands, the Siddhas, become amazed. As those ladies listen, they are embarrassed to find their minds yielding to the pursuit of lusty desires, and in their distress, they are unaware that the belts of their garments are loosening. Text 20 from this chapter. The words describe the expression of natural ecstatic love. The gopis say, text 20, "O sinless Yashoda, your darling child, the son of Maharaj Nanda, has festively enhanced his attire with a jasmine garland, and he is now playing along the Yamuna in the company of the cows and cowherd boys." amusing his dear companions. The gentle breeze honors him with its soothing fragrance of sandalwood, while the various upadevas standing on all sides like panegyrists, who knows the meaning? Like comical actors, panegyrists, offer their music, singing, and gifts of tribute. The Gopis also say, going back, this is chapter 35, chapter 29 is the beginning, the Gopis hearing Krishna's flute and going mad. And so they come, see, and Krishna says, okay, you should go home now. And they say to Krishna, "Oh, all-powerful one, you should not speak in this cruel way. Do not reject us, who have renounced all material enjoyment to render devotional service to your lotus feet. Reciprocate with us, O stubborn one, just as the primeval Lord Sri Narayana reciprocates with his devotees in their endeavors for liberation." Someone may say, in this whole section on, they're speaking humble and they're also asking for some special intimacy. Someone may say, apparently people said, that the Gopis' humble appeal for Lord Krishna's association in this verse is inappropriate, an example of rasa basa. It is not rasa basa. In truth, these words spoken by the Gopis may be interpreted to be a series of puns that show a meaning very different from what seems to be an impassioned appeal. This will be explained later, so shortly. In this way, the sublime sweetness of the Lord's pastimes is established. He takes the topic of rasabhasa and goes further. Someone may say that rasabhasa is present in the following statements of Bali Maharaj in Bhagavatam 8, 20, 11, and 12, 13. Bali Maharaj says to Shukracharya, although he is Vishnu himself, out of fear he has covered himself in the form of a Brahmana to come to me begging. Under the circumstances, because he has assumed the form of a Brahmana, even if he irreligiously arrests me or even kills me, I shall not retaliate, although he is my enemy. There's like contradictory things here. If this Brahmana is really Lord Vishnu, who is worshipped by Vedic hymns, he would never give up his widespread reputation. So if I submit to him, he's not going to punish me. Either he would lie down having been killed by me, or he would kill me in a fight. Paragraph. Someone may say that these impious words, inspired by Shukracharya's trickery, are improper, and therefore bhakti abhas, or incompatible with devotional service. However, because with his feet, Lord Vamana directly touched Bali Maharaj and gave him devotion, these words are not truly bhakti abhas. These two verses were spoken by Bali Maharaj to Shukracharya. Jiva Goswami is doing what our acharyas like to do. He's churning the topics of the Bhagavatam. Like, this is the example of taking sandalwood and a flat stone and making sandalwood paste. The fragrance comes out. So the sweetness of the Bhagavatam is by taking these topics that maybe it's, a little elevated and a little esoteric, but it's the emphasis is the sweetness, and addressing people that say, hey, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this and there's something wrong with that. So he's addressing there's nothing wrong, and he's bringing out the sweetness. That's Priti Sandarbha. That's Kṛṣṇa. Sambhoga continues with 2 verses. Sambhoga is meeting. Vipralambha is separation. Sambhoga is meeting. Sambhoga continues with 2 verses. It's this Priti Sandarbha again. From this chapter 35, text 24-25, quote, as Kṛṣṇa respectfully greets his well-wishing friends, his eyes roll slightly as if from intoxication. He wears a flower garland and decorates his tender cheeks with the brilliance of his golden earrings. His face is pale like a badara berry. That's not normal. It's blackish. Pale like a badara berry. With cheerful face, the master of the cowherds, moving with the grace of a regal elephant, like the rising moon in the evening, returns in the evening, relieving the cows and Braja from the pain experienced during the day. So these are meditations by the Gopīs on Krishna's pastimes throughout the day, and now he's returning. So they're going to be ending their prayers here, or song. In this verse, the words Vraja Gavam means the young calves and the old cows which did not go pasturing. The next verse, O king, thus during the daytime the women of Vrindavan took pleasure in continuously singing about the pastimes of Kṛṣṇa, and those ladies' minds and hearts, absorbed in him, were filled with great festivity. Paragraph, thus on all days, Ahasu, in the afternoon the Gopīs felt great bliss. Shukadev speaks. And now comes a long section, very interesting. This is a series of verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. Anyone here? Well, Srimad Bhagavatam is a book written by Sanatana Goswami that can be described in a number of ways, but part of it is it's a commentary on the Bhagavatam. So he's taking these verses from chapter 35 and presenting them. It's Narada speaking to, there's 2 people there with him, are Uddhava and Gopakumar. So he's explaining, before Gopakumar goes to Braja, he's explaining what's it like in Braja. So just in case you're planning to go to Braja, here's what it's like. Narada says, how can my tongue dare try to touch the greatness of Krishna's dearmost possession? What's that? Flute. Which stands out from all else, which benefits only him, and which always rests playfully in his lotus hands? Commentary. The sound of Krishna's flute attracted the young Gopis to join Kṛṣṇa in the rasa dance, and after the rasa dance that sound lingered in their memory. In Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 35, which is what we're discussing, the Gopis' remembrance of that flute song is captured in 11 pairs of verses, of which the first pair is, quote, the Gopis said, when Mukunda vibrates the flute he has placed to his lips, stopping its holes with his tender fingers, he rests his left cheek on his left arm and makes his eyebrows dance. At that time, the demigoddesses traveling in the sky with their husbands, the Siddhas, become amazed. As those ladies listen, they are embarrassed to find their minds yielding to the pursuit of lusty desires, and in their distress, they are unaware that the belts of their garments are loosening. That's text 2 and 3. Paragraph. Commentary. Glorifying Krishna's flute Srila Sanatana Goswami here begins a 17-verse discussion of the next topic, which is Ashesha Mahatva Madhuri. Ashesha Mahatva Madhuri, the sweetness of all of Krishna's excellent qualities. Ashesha Mahatva Madhuri. In text 140 through 149, specifically, they glorify Krishna's flute. Everything about Krishna's flute is exceptional, since there is no other object like it in the entire world. There's nothing to compare it to. One can understand the greatness of that flute only by studying the amazing effects its sound produces. No one but Krishna could own such a flute, and indeed Krishna never lets it out of his hands. Rather, he takes every opportunity to allow the flute to drink the nectar of his lips. Next verse, text 141, Sanatana Goswami writes, "Still, by the power of the Lord's mercy, I will say something about it," that's the flute, "as far as I am able. Please listen carefully." Next text, 142, "The words of the Upanishads and other Vedic texts come forth from the Lord's own divine mouth. But simply by contact with his bimba-red lips, that wooden object, the all-enchanting little bamboo flute, has created a sound more nectarine than the words of the Vedas and any other form of speech." Commentary. Narada has great admiration for Krishna's flute, and so he calls it by the affectionate diminutive name Vangshika, or little bamboo flute. At the same time, however, he cannot help but feel jealous of the flute's intimate relationship with Krishna, which someone like himself can never have. Therefore, he always uses the somewhat derogatory term Dharavi, meaning wooden object. Just tasting sweetness. Text 143. "Hearing that sound of the flute, all the demigods and perfected mystics flying in their airplanes were bewildered in divine love, and so were their wives. Indra, Shiva, Brahma, and other demigods were so confused that they could no longer tell fact from illusion." Commentary. Flying over the earthly Vrindavan, demigods and sages in their vimanas, the subtle vehicles that carry them all over the universe by the power of air, in case you wondered what was their fuel, were helplessly attracted by Krishna's flute, and their wives succumbed to the charms of Cupid. In Srimad Bhagavatam 10:21-12, so that's a number of chapters previously, they're speaking. Krishna's beauty, they're describing that scene with the demigods and their wives. Krishna's beauty and character create a festival for all women. Indeed, when the demigods' wives, flying in airplanes with their husbands, catch sight of him and hear his resonant flute song, their hearts are shaken by Cupid, and they become so bewildered that the flowers fall out of their hair and their belts loosen. Now back to chapter 35, this is still commentary. When the demigods and sages in their vimanas approach Vrindavan, they first heard the faint sound of Krishna's flute from a distance. Then, as they came closer and the sound became more audible, even Brahma, Shiva, and Indra became bewildered. Paragraph. The principal demigods and sages were so confused they couldn't even remember their own identities. They thought, quote, now we can no longer be certain whether the Brahman we knew from the Upanishads is actually the absolute truth. Perhaps the sound of this flute is the absolute truth instead, because it seems to be the supreme embodiment of pure ecstasy. We're going to go through 149, but next is 144. Hope you're enjoying. The great sages, their meditations breaking, felt transformations of ecstasy arising within themselves as the motions of the moon and other planets, swift and unceasing, which strictly follow the whirling wheel of time, just stopped. Commentary. Not only the faithful theists among the demigods and sages, but also the self-contented impersonalists were enchanted by Krishna's flute. Those impersonalists also experienced the sattvika bhavas of love of God, trembling, herepulation, floods of tears, and so on, which they could never have dreamt while philosophizing on the bliss of Brahman. And apart from those independent sages, also overcome by prema, were the planets in space, whose motions are normally dictated by the rule of time. We heard this yesterday. Remember? Yesterday evening, Bhishma speaking, and time causes things, and specifically the commentary says time moves air, and air moves the planets, and time moves everything. So it's saying the same thing here. The planets in space whose motions are normally dictated by the rule of time, but it was moved by air. Okay, the planets felt sattvika bhava of being stunned, as indicated by the words of the Gopīs. Quote from this chapter 35, text 15. Shiva, Brahma, Indra, and other chief demigods become confused upon hearing the sound. The, quote, other chief demigods referred to include Chandra, Surya, and the other rulers of the planets. Shukadeva Goswami also mentions the ecstasy of the planets in his account in the Rasa Leela. You getting the picture? Like, Krishna's playing his flute and the gopis are saying, the planets are experiencing the sattvika bhavas. Here's the scriptural reference. Sanatana Goswami is invoking. They become bewildered. That's one of the symptoms of sattvika bhava. So in the Rasa Leela chapter 33, quote, the wives of the demigods observing Krishna's playful activities from their airplanes were entranced and became agitated with lust. Indeed, even the moon and his entourage, the stars, became astonished. Krishna's flute is pretty powerful. Sattvika bhava for all these different entities. Text 145. The cowherds dedicated to Krishna everything they had, their bodies, families, and property, and their very selves. Those cowherds, indifferent to their own customs and needs, paying no heed to success in this world or the next, had so much respect for Krishna that they even bowed down to their own wives because those wives were dear to him. Commentary. Persons unfamiliar with Krishna were not the only ones bewildered by his charms. Even his own close friends and family members were confused. The Gopās of Vraja offered everything they had to Krishna, including their children and wives. Thus in Harivangsha, to 1246, the Gopis tell Nanda Maharaj, quote, "From today onward, O sinless one, in dangerous situations, broad-eyed Kṛṣṇa will be the shelter for the cowherds, the cows, and our whole community. He will be the master of us all." The phrase, "our whole community," implies that the Gopis meant to include in their statement the young Gopis, but were too embarrassed to mention Krishna's relationship with them directly. As the Gopis well know, even their own wives belong to Kṛṣṇa. Therefore, when the Gopis refer to them as Bharya, that's our whole community, the women they are responsible to maintain, they mean for Krishna's enjoyment, not their own. Three more. 146. Four more. So attached to Krishna's company were the cowherds' little sons that they acted just like his shadow. If even for a moment they couldn't see him, if he sometimes went away on a whim, they were filled with distress, and when he returned they would rejoice and rush to touch him. Commentary. Krishna's cowherd friends were with him constantly. Sometimes, however, Kṛṣṇa would leave them for a short while to pursue some other interest, like seeing the beautiful sights of Vrindavan. In Srimad Bhagavatam 10:12:6, chapter 12, that's what the cowherd boys did before they met with Aghasura. Shukadeva Goswami describes how when Kṛṣṇa returned from those excursions, his friends would greet him. So text 6. Sometimes Kṛṣṇa would go to a somewhat distant place to see the beauty of the forest. Then all the other boys would run to meet him, each one saying, "I shall be the first one to run and touch Kṛṣṇa. I shall touch Kṛṣṇa first." In this way they enjoyed life by repeatedly touching Kṛṣṇa. Text 147. Sri Radha and the other supremely fortunate Gopis abandoned their husbands, children, and other relatives, their goals for the next life, their religious principles, and even their shyness. And the states of ecstatic love they attained left them always distraught. In such states, they complained pitifully in sweet voices and went through upheavals in which they sometimes lost consciousness, stunned like trees, unable to understand anything. Better watch out. Commentary. Sri Rukmini and the other queens of Dwaraka are the consorts of Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, but the Gopis headed by Srimati Radharani are the favorite devotees of Parama Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead in his highest feature. Their love for Kṛṣṇa drives them to extreme states of ecstasy, as they tell in their own words. Chapter 35, text 16-17, quote, "As Kṛṣṇa strolls through Vraja, with his lotus petal feet marking the ground with the distinctive emblems of flag, thunderbolt, lotus, and elephant goad, he relieves the distress of the ground felt from the cow's hooves. As he plays his renowned flute, his body moves with the grace of an elephant. Thus we Gopis, who become agitated by Cupid when Kṛṣṇa playfully glances at us, stand as still as trees, unaware that our hair and garments are becoming loose." Paragraph. Narada speaks of the Gopis' complaints as Madhura Tukai, bittersweet. For those who hear them are overwhelmed by both joy and by sorrow. Everyone living in Braja during Krishna's presence was constantly immersed in prema, intense prema, but when Krishna played his flute, the ecstasy of that prema grew unlimitedly, affecting not only those already in love with Krishna, but all beings living and inert. Text 148. Listen, and I will tell you the most wonderful thing. Upon hearing Krishna's flute, the many animals born without intelligence abandoned their own natures. The cows did, and the bulls and calves, and the wild beasts of the forest, and the birds living in the trees, and the water birds sporting in the distant lakes, and so too did the trees and plants, and even the inanimate beings like rivers and clouds. Commentary. One would expect the Brajabasis, expert in the arts of rasa, to respond ecstatically to the sound of Krishna's flute. What is amazing is that dull animals and even lesser beings shared that ecstasy. The creatures of Vrindavan mentioned in this verse are listed in order of decreasing intelligence. Along with the cows, bulls, and calves, the village animals also included buffaloes, sheep, and goats. Those domestic animals kept company with Krishna every day. The deer and other forest animals saw him less often, but even they tasted the ecstasies of prema when they heard Krishna's flute. The birds frequenting the Vrindavan forest, who knew Krishna from the times he had rested beneath their trees, and even the birds who lived in lakes far away, had the divine intelligence to come nearby when Krishna played his flute. The unmoving creatures, the trees, bushes, and vines, and even the non-living rivers also joined this festival of ecstasy initiated by Krishna's flute song. And apart from all the beings present in Braja on the surface of the earth, those who joined in that festival included even the clouds in the sky. One more, and we're done. Text 149. The moving creatures became immobile. The inanimate beings moved. The conscious beings lost consciousness, and the unconscious gained it. Constantly, indeed, these creatures and objects are submerged in a vast flood of prema rasa, overwhelmed by many transformations of ecstasy. Commentary. Animals stunned by ecstasy lost their power to move. Trees and other plants became mobile, trembling and erupting with new leaves. Conscious creatures no longer showed external expressions of life. And unconscious logs and stones appeared to come alive by sprouting leaves and rolling about in the wind. All these extraordinary phenomena were signs of the ecstasy evoked by the song of Krishna's flute in the words of the Gopīs. This is chapter 21, text 19. Dear friends, as Krishna and Balaram pass through the forest with their cowherd friends, leading their cows, they carry ropes to bind the cow's rear legs at the time of milking. When Lord Krishna plays on his flute, the sweet music causes the moving living entities to become stunned and the non-moving trees to tremble with ecstasy. These things are certainly very wonderful. Any questions? just hearing has an effect on the heart. What to speak of the acharyas that have direct experience of these features of Kṛṣṇa and his exchanges with the residents of Vrindavan. When we hear in Brahma Samhita that the second of the mantras received by Lord Brahma came from Krishna's flute, and it came out as Kama Gayatri, came from his mouth. That Kama Gayatri is a very elevated Gayatri mantra. And, little old Hare Krishna folks receive that Gayatri mantra along with Gayatri initiation or Brahminical initiation to meditate upon the same things that we're hearing. So the expansion of that Gayatri mantra can be found in this chapter, Krishna's flute song. Very esoteric and very elevated, certainly beyond our realization. But even beyond our realization, as we've been saying, the sweetness is there, even in our covered and dull state. The sweetness is there, and just by hearing, of course, doesn't mean, therefore, let's just go to the 10th canto. I'm thinking, when the evening session finishes with chapter 11 of the 10th canto, I'm thinking of going to Uddhava Gita. Uddhava Gita is in the 11th canto. It celebrated Krishna's final instructions before closing his earthly pastimes. And philosophical, but very deep and also very practical. Let's see, that's my thought at the moment. But the Bhagavatam is medicine for material disease. The material disease, different ways of describing the material disease. It's forgetfulness of Kṛṣṇa, and the spiritual wellness is remembrance of Kṛṣṇa. Or the material disease is affinity for the temporary, specifically trying to be the enjoyer of the temporary. And the spiritual position is detachment from that mode and attachment to Kṛṣṇa. And attachment to Kṛṣṇa means his devotional service. So this is meant to awaken, along with the chanting of Mahamantra, specifically to awaken our service mood, service to Kṛṣṇa mood, because serve someone else or something else. Mine is Kṛṣṇa. Unless Kṛṣṇa's service consciousness becomes awakened. So the hearing of the Bhagavatam, it's the medicine. Bhavo sadat shrotra manobi ramat. It's taken to the ear. That's nice medicine. A little report Bhakti True Maharaj's well-being. There's a medical team, they call themselves, giving reports every 12 hours, I guess, to temple presidents, and that gets forwarded to me. And he's been on a ventilator since the 17th, and already it's now 22nd, right? So, I don't know, it's in the afternoon or evening of the 17th, so that's 5 days at least, plus. And there's some procedure that they've used as plasma something or other. I don't exactly understand. People that are medical doctors, they'll know. But it's demonstrated to be especially helpful for people that have this coronavirus. His condition is stable. It's critical but stable, and it's been like that for several days. Critical but stable. His oxygen level is at 50%, but his vital symptoms are stable. Critical but stable. And that's a different kind of medicine. And we're all going to die, and before dying, good likelihood there'll be some diseases. Janma mrityu jara vyadi. So what's the medicine for Janma mrityu jara vyadi? The devotee community in the world. I'm getting messages from different parts of the world where they're appealing for prayer and this and that. People speaking this and that. So his service to Prabhupada has gained the attention of much of the devotee community in the world, and prayers and so forth, because everything is in Krishna's hands. It's not the doctors are. They're saying the doctors are giving him special, close, vigilant care in all the things that are supposed to be done. They're doing. This is the report from the team. But it's hanging in a balance of critical but stable. So it's not us lying in that hospital bed with a ventilator for 5 days and who knows. So may he resume his service to Prabhupada in this particular life form, and may we also learn some lesson about better take the medicine for the material disease while you're healthy, because who knows what's in store for any of us or those that are near and dear to us, and if we want to help them, we have to have the spiritual well-being to extend that to other people. And the medicine is taken through the ear, and it goes to the heart, and it makes the heart free from this affinity for matter and being the enjoyment of matter. It may take a lot of hearing to get there, but that's attraction for Kṛṣṇa and detachment from matter. Both are necessary. Detachment, we had this discussion yesterday for the Sunday program. This young devotee there asking, how do you cultivate detachment? Not a kind of question a young person is asking these days. How do you cultivate detachment? But just a little sharing from some research that was done from Nectar of Devotion, chapter 17. Those of you that are teachers or students might be interested in hearing this. There's one paragraph that's a little confusing, or apparently is confusing, requires some explanation. There's a type of bhakti that is aroused directly by Kṛṣṇa, because normally we hear that bhakti is awakened by bhakti, one who's carrying bhakti. That's standard. In the case of Shukadeva Goswami, it's the exception to that rule, where super soul within his heart inspired Shanti or Shanta Rati, which was, so Rati, in our ISKCON language, it's synonymous with Bhava. Rati and Bhava are used interchangeably. And some of our acharyas, they like specifically this word Rati. So Shanta Rati was awakened. And, who was Shukadeva Goswami before he was Shukadeva Goswami? So Brahma Vaivarta Purana says he was Radharani's parrot. So that's Brahma Vaivarta Purana. Whoever he was, maybe there are different Shukadevs, different yuga cycles, but something previous, and the super soul within his heart awakened as Shantarati. And one of the symptoms of Shantarati, there's two. There's detachment. For there to be rati or bhava, there has to be detachment, vairagya, detachment, and some attraction for the Brahman feature of the Supreme, Shantarati, which then the commentary is explained. After he was born, it becomes even more prominent. But then by association with Vyasadeva and Srimad Bhagavatam, that Shantarati transformed and blossomed quickly. So detachment is important, and attraction for Sat is important. Detachment from Sat and attachment for Sat. For Bhakti to blossom. And it doesn't mean if we don't have that, we're in the garbage can or something like that. We're bad or we're useless or something. It's not like that. But for this ecstasy that we're reading about in the Bhagavatam, even with Bali Maharaj, he was experiencing an ecstasy just seeing Vamana, and he was detached from whatever might be the consequences of Shukracharya being unhappy with him or whatever. He just wanted to give everything to Vishnu. He was ready so it was exhibited after he gave everything, and the Lord's foot was placed on his head. He then tied him up. And he didn't protest. Hey, wait a minute, I surrender to you. You put your foot on my head, and I'm your devotee. Why are you tying me up? No protest. And then Vamana said, I just wanted to show the world, just see what a great devotee he is. So tribulations and examination may come even when you have exalted bhakti. That's just fine if that's what Kṛṣṇa wants. But get to the point where attachment and detachment, attachment for loving service, it takes some cultivation, and with that detachment from being the enjoyer of the temporary, whatever that might be. And the method is just medicine through the ear, and then putting into action that transformed consciousness, living our lives accordingly. It's a powerful process to cure the material disease. Powerful process. We have a powerful disease too. Okay, let's see if there's some discussion. Anyone in the room? Then we'll go to online. Topic, someone? Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. initially when the pandemic started, this COVID started, so when devotees were asking about suffering of devotees, who gets this disease, so your reply was, devotees are not suffering, only other people, sinful people go through this suffering. So right now the situation of Maharaj, how to see from?
He's suffering. I mean, from the material point of view, at a certain stage he couldn't breathe. That's suffering, because I had that happen. It's just something that you normally take for granted. It's just taken away. You can't breathe. You take little short breaths, and it's inadequate, and it's more than uncomfortable. So I don't know the statement, devotees don't suffer. When one's consciousness is absorbed in transcendence, there is pain and one recognizes the pain, but one becomes detached from the pain because of transcendental consciousness. But it takes a very elevated soul to transcend pain. Prabhupada was one such person. Although Hari Sori told me a story twice during the whole time he was servant of Prabhupada, because his condition was so severe, he was unable to do his service. He told me the story. One evening, Prabhupada had his chadar on, the chadar over his head, and his whole body was trembling. And he rang the bell, so Hari Sori came, and Prabhupada was so upset that my condition is so severe, I can't do my service. But otherwise, he was in enormous pain all the time. I wasn't aware, completely unaware, but his kidneys and this and that, very painful. But he just transcended it. He went on and only people who were close to him knew, and other examples. So it's possible to, Bhishma Dev, and others. But that's proportionate to one's consciousness, that the pain is there when it recognizes, you don't become dull, just consciousness is above it. Pain is there. Okay? Anyone else?
I have a few questions, Maharaj. So, just asking, because immediately we talked about this, so as you were responding, so I felt that it is so deep-rooted, means elevating someone's consciousness it is so deep that I feel that I cannot help anyone in the time of crisis at all, despite of just being truthful about my own condition and praying to Kṛṣṇa. So it is such a elevated state of consciousness that to get out of misery, to be detached from that feeling, I guess only Kṛṣṇa can help. Is that fair to think like that?
Instruments of Kṛṣṇa can help bring Kṛṣṇa's mercy to the person. Mm. Ultimately, it's Kṛṣṇa's intervention. But one can be an instrument. Next.
So Maharaj, one statement came up, bewilderment is a symptom of sattvika bhava. Can you kindly elaborate on that?
No.
Okay.
It's just, the normal state of consciousness is the straight line, A to B to C. And bewilderment is, I lost my bearings, because it's not normal anymore. It's something inexplicable. I'm bewildered. Like when Mother Yasoda looked inside Krishna's mouth, she became bewildered.
It is transcendental sense.
That's a transcendental ecstasy. It's not us.
Yeah. And also there was a reference like wild animals did not see Krishna often. So is it due to their being in a different mode of nature? That's why.
Different arrangements by Krishna also. Different.
Okay. And the love that residents of Vrindavan were experiencing for Krishna, that they didn't even care for their next life. So my curiosity was that more of their effort or Krishna's mercy? What was more?
You know the answer. It's not one versus the other. Krishna reciprocates. So, which is it more important? One's shelter taking in Krishna or Krishna's giving shelter? It's the same. Krishna reciprocates. It's a loving exchange. Between lover and beloved, which is more important, the lover or the beloved?
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yesterday we were discussing about this Srimad Bhagavatam, that what we read is Srimad Bhagavatam has been spoken by Vyasadeva. So, but when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, so in that the descriptions constantly move, like Shukadeva Goswami is speaking, then Sutta Goswami is speaking. So I was unable to relate like that. Is it a narration or like how is it happening that if Vyasadeva spoke this, then again he could foresee all this, that these interactions will happen in this way?
Well, some of the things, it's Vyasadeva didn't speak it, Vyasadeva wrote it.
Yeah, so...
Okay, so, and he's writing about what Sutta said, what Shukadeva said, or what Maitreya said, and he's the writer. In some cases it's past tense, in some cases it's future tense. Vyasadeva's the author or compiler. That's what Vyasa means, the compiler. Okay?
So basically he wrote everything that Sutta Goswami is hearing this.
It's the same question and it's the same answer. Okay, we're going to do the online questions up here. No, okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.